Hello and welcome to another episode of Knowledge Enthusiast Reacts or Comments on. In this episode, we're taking a look at the Americapox, the Missing Plague video from CGP? CGP Grey. Wait, it's confusing, these letters, numbers, whatever. CGP Grey. So, which is the video that is an attempt to explain, or not an attempt, it explains why, so you know, when Christopher Columbus rediscovered America and it was then settled by Europeans, almost the entire native population was wiped out, and almost all of them not by force, not by weapons, but by diseases brought from the old world, which means that things like tuberculosis, measles, smallpox, and stuff like that just spread over Native America and killed 90% of the population there. So why were the Europeans able to infect all these Native Americans, but why weren't they able to infect the Europeans? Why did they not have any kind of plague over there? And this is what this video will be talking about. I will at some points pause and maybe comment on things or explain what I think about it, and if I mess things up, if I want you to have additional information, then you find the info text box right there, which will contain all the corrections, all the additional information, and so on and so on. So about me, I am Ossi. I'm born in East Germany. I'm 31 years old. I was raised and live now in Hamburg, Germany. And I was a former history student without degree and a former video game journalist. And on this channel, I continue my quest to learn with you together. And this is why I usually don't do any kind of research beforehand. I research when I edit the video, so I can put all these additional stuff in the info text box. Let's just start with the video. And Americapox, the Missing Plague by CGP Grey. Let's just call him Grey because these letters are confusing. And yeah, let's start.
Between the first Europeans arriving in 1492 and the Victorian Age, the indigenous population of the New World dropped by at least 90%. The cause? Not the conquistadors and company. They killed lots of people, but their death count is nothing compared to what they brought with them. Smallpox, typhus, tuberculosis, influenza, bubonic plague, cholera, mumps, measles, and more.
And I think the most infamous conquistadores, which were from Spain, were Claudio Pizarro, who I think was the one dealing with the Aztecs, and Hernan Cortés dealing with the Inca. I could be switching them just right up. But in both cases, they were infamous for being very brutal, for slaughtering the population. I think it was Pizarro who fought with the Aztecs and making the I don't know if this is an expression you have in English, but in German. We have the expression Montezuma's Rache, or Montezuma's Revenge, which means that the conquistadores did get some kind of disease, which was diarrhea, which was seen as the revenge of Montezuma after being killed and Tenochtitlan, or whatever the city was called, being destroyed. But as we all know today, It was just that the new food from the new world, and the new surroundings and the climate just were not that good for your stomach, and made you suffer from diarrhea and sometimes worse. But it was not a really plague. It was based on mostly the food.
Tuberculosis, influenza, bubonic plague, cholera, mumps, measles, and more leapt from those first explorers to the coastal tribes, then onward the microscopic invaders spread through a hemisphere of people with no defenses against them. Tens of millions died. These germs decided the fate of these battles long before the fighting started. Now ask yourself, why didn't the Europeans get sick? If New Worlders were vulnerable to Old World diseases, then surely Old Worlders would be vulnerable to New World diseases. Yet there was no Americapox spreading eastward, infecting Europe and cutting the population from 90 million to 9. Had Americapox existed, it would have rather dampened European ability for transatlantic expansion. To answer why this didn't happen, we need first to distinguish regular diseases like the common cold from what we'll call plagues. First, plagues spread quickly between people. Sneezes spread plagues faster than handshakes, which are faster than closeness. Plagues use more of this than this. Secondly, and importantly, they kill you quickly or you become immune. Catch a plague and you're dead within 7 to 30 days. Survive and you'll never get it again. Your body has learned to fight it. You might still carry it. The plague lives in you. You can spread it, but it can't hurt you.
Which is one of the main reasons, I think, for vaccines. Because when you get vaccinated, you get, if I remember correctly, you get a small dose of the sickness, of the bacteria or virus that would create something like, for example, measles, and you get that into your system, which is one of the main reasons why there are some people against vaccines, because there's a very, 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 very slight chance that you can actually get sick by a vaccine. But therefore, for this to happen, you have to have some highly or badly, very, very, very bad immune system. So and because of this, your body, or the antibacteria in your body, and all the parts of your body that are responsible for fighting diseases, will learn to fight it, and so you are immune. In many cases for your life. In some cases, you have to be vaccinated after some years, but in most cases, you are immune for life. And the same reasoning is when you have, I don't know how you say it in English, windpocken, which is literally translated windpox. You know, when you are a kid and these itching pox all over your body, which is why you have these pox parties, so that because as a child you are not that vulnerable for some reason, and because you get immune after, it is better to catch it as a child, which is why some parties will be organized to on purpose give you pox, and then you are immune for life. But when you catch it as an adult, it is life endangering if you get it then. So this is how most plagues work. Like the Black Death, or the plague, was deadly to many, many, many people, but there were also many, many, many people who survived it and who would never catch it again. So at least there's that.
Still carry it. The plague lives in you. You can spread it, but it can't hurt you. The surface answer to this question isn't that Europeans had better immune systems to fight off New World plagues, it's that the New World didn't have plagues for them to catch. They had regular diseases, but there was no Americapox to carry. These are history's biggest killers, and they all come from the Old World. But why? Let's dig deeper and talk cholera. A plague that spreads if your civilization does a bad job of separating drinking water from pooping water. London was terrible at this.
Not only London, most European cities were, and some even very, very late. So the last bigger cholera outbreak on continental Europe was in, I think, 1848 or something in Hamburg, and it was caused by, as you just said, bad sanitation, very, very close buildings. So if you go to Hamburg now, you see a prosperous city. You see nice villages, nice quarters, nice. Everything is nice. Everything is more or less clean. If you go back like just 100 years, not even, just before the Second World War, or let's say within the Second World War, there were a little something called Gängeviertel, which means something. I think there is no literal translation for it. If yes, I will put it up here. But these so-called Gängeviertel were areas of the city where, first point, the very, very poor lived in buildings that were sometimes hella old, hella broke, and very, very bad sanitized. And they were all very, very close. You can imagine a slum with huts made of what you just can find. And now imagine you build some real houses with more floors, with no sanitation, and all compressed. So you have houses. This is why they were called Gängeviertel, because Gänge in English would mean a small pathway, a very, very small. We're speaking of so small that even one person barely fits through, if at all. And most of them were even tunnels, because the buildings were built so that there was no architecture that was in place here. There was no construction workers of any sorts in terms of good ones. And when the cholera broke out in Hamburg, it was even worse, even more parts of the city. And as Hamburg is a city with a lot of water in and around it, called the Fleets, between Elbe and Ulster, where the Fleet is a small channel running through the city itself, a little bit like the channels in Venice. And all the drinking water comes from there, and also all the poop water goes in there. And these channels were not that connected to like the Elbe, so there was no real circulation. It's more or less just a pond with a very low grade of water exchange, and that's now the water you drink, which is, I mean, cholera. and it killed like I think only 30 to 40,000 inhabitants in just a time span of a few weeks. And it was devastating. And the same goes for London, which had similar areas like the Gängeviertel, like we see here in this picture. I will put up a picture of Gängeviertel right here, so you can see what I mean, because English is not my main language, so I might be very bad at describing it. So let me just put a picture here, and even maybe in the info text box some definition. But yeah, London had not the same reason, but a similar not the same. Forget it. Just issue was the word. London had kind of the same issue, but even worse, and was, if I remember correctly, the last city in Europe whatsoever to have cholera, which was in the late 19th century. So even long after Hamburg, because Hamburg, after the cholera, the big cholera, they finally made attempts at cleaning water and having filtered water and water supplies and stuff like that. Whereas in London, you had choleras like every summer. And in the Victorian era, it was believed that plagues are caused by bad smells. So all they did was not to sanitize water, not to improve the water conditions in the city, to filter water. No, what they did, they just literally dumped perfume in the River Thames to get rid of the smell, and therefore get rid of the sickness. Which, as you might already have thought or guessed, didn't work. Which is why they then very, very much later, after much influence by scientists who knew better all along and always tried to get the government to do something about the water quality, finally started doing something. But at what cost? And they could have done this very, very much earlier. In Hamburg, it was because the now famous, I think, Robert Koch came to Hamburg and then told the government of Hamburg, just do it better and do it quick, which in London was not the case.
Drinking water from pooping water. London was terrible at this, making it the cholera capital of the world. Cholera can rip through dense neighborhoods, killing swaths of the population before moving on.
It's also known as the Yellow Death.
It has to move on. In a small, isolated group, a plague like cholera cannot survive. It kills all available victims, leaving only the immune, and then there's nowhere to go. It's a fire that burns through its fuel. But a city, shining city on the hill, to which rural migrants flock, where hundreds of babies are born a day, this is sanctuary for the fire of plague. Fresh kindling comes to it. The plague flares and smolders and flares and smolders again, impossible to extinguish. Historically, in city borders, plagues killed faster than people could breed. Cities grew because more people moved to them than died inside of them.
Which is why, especially the cholera was so popular and devastating within the age of Industrial Revolution, because after let's picture the end of the 18th century on the turn to the 19th century, when the Industrial Revolution started, and slowly but gradually people moved to cities, because before that you usually had you were some kind of farmer, you had your land, but it is not, you can't really get rich on the back of it. You can't really get a prosperous life on the back of it. And so the people had dreams, and their dreams was to get a job in these cities, in maybe a manufactory, and earn more money, have more freedom, maybe, and so on and so on. So people moved in droves, especially those who had neither land nor something else, so the unemployed, or those who seek for new chances. They moved through the cities all over the world, first in Great Britain, especially to London, and then in all other parts of the world, which is why the cities starting in the first half of the 19th century started to grow rapidly. And with them also the diseases started to grow rapidly. There were diseases before, of course, and London was always a very big city and always had this problem. But the Industrial Revolution just top-notched all of that, and was more or less the disease utopia.
Cities grew because more people moved to them than died inside of them. Cities only started growing from their own population in the 1900s, when medicine finally left its leeches and bloodletting phase and entered its soap and soup phase, giving humans some tools to slow death. But before that, a city was an unintentional playground for plagues and a grim machine to sort the immune from the rest. So the deeper answer is that the New World didn't have plagues because the New World didn't have big, dense, terribly sanitized, deeply interconnected cities for plagues to thrive. Okay, but the New World wasn't completely barren of cities.
Yeah, that's probably the most famous city of all America. It's and especially of Mesoamerica. This is Tenochtitlan. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly. I am not an Aztec and not a Mexican. But yeah, it was believed to be at some point one of the biggest cities in the world. And if I remember correctly, I was once told that there are estimates that more or less 1 million people lived in Tenochtitlan alone. And so we have a big city, and I don't think that it was so sanitized. But yeah, still no plague. And one of the reasons for it, I think, would also be that this is only one example, and it is more or less the only example of a very big city in America. In North America, you had tribes, you had most likely nomads, you had even maybe some tribes who lived in some kind of city, like the pueblos in the mountains, and some who might have built some log huts. And in South America, you in the Andes, how are you supposed to build a big city in the Andes? I don't know how you say, in the mountain, in the big mountain chain, where you find some cities like Machu Picchu, but not of this extent. Because this is in now more or less Mexico City is located in a very good spot. It has water, as we see here. It has a pretty much plain area, a really big plain area, which you can urbanize, and you can have agriculture on, and you can build channels and stuff. Whereas try to do this in the mountains, or try to do this in the thick jungle of the Amazon rainforest. So this was more or less the perfect perfect location for a big city, and is one of the reasons why this is one of the only big cities that America has. Because he just said that one of the reasons also is that you have cities that are interconnected, especially on European mainland.
To thrive. Okay, but the New World wasn't completely barren of cities, and tribes weren't completely isolated. Otherwise, the newly arrived smallpox in the 1400s couldn't have spread. Cities are only part of the puzzle. They're required for plagues, but cities don't make the germs that start the plagues. Those germs come from the missing piece.
Animals.
Now, most germs don't want to kill you for the same reason you don't want to burn down your house. Germs live in you. Chronic diseases like leprosy are terrible because they're very good at living in you and not killing you. Plague lethality is an accident, a misunderstanding, because the germs that cause plagues don't know they're in humans. They think they're in this. Plagues come from animals. Whooping cough comes from pigs, as does flu, as well as from birds. Our friend the cow alone is responsible for measles, tuberculosis, and smallpox.
But isn't tuberculosis nutrition based? So I was told that one of the reasons why tuberculosis was so devastating on ships at that time is because they had almost no vitamin intake, especially vitamin C, which is why they then transported sauerkraut, for example, because it is has a very high volume of vitamin C. So I always thought that tuberculosis is some kind of vitamin deficiency, and not really a plague or a virus/bacteria based plague. But it makes sense, because you also on these ships you have livestock transports, and I think that you are more responsible if you have no vitamin C intake. So you could perhaps be safer to just eat vitamin C and you don't catch tuberculosis. But since they catch it. Is it that, or am I completely missing something here? I don't know.
Our friend the cow alone is responsible for measles, tuberculosis, and smallpox. For the cow, these diseases are no big deal, like colds for us. But when cow germs get in humans, the things they do to make a cow a little sick to spread make humans very sick. Deadly sick. Now, germs jumping species is extraordinarily rare. That's why generations of humans can spend time around animals just fine. Being the patient zero of a new animal-to-human plague is winning a terrible lottery. But a colonial age city raises the odds.
Yeah. So I think we all know that plagues come from animals. Especially if you look in modern times, it is still believed that at some point, some kind of ape had HIV, which then catched on a human, which then spread it all over the world. And now HIV is one of the most devastating diseases you can get. And especially, we still have no idea to heal it. Then we have SARS, which is also known as the bird flu, or we have the pig flu, and COVID-19, which we experience now, is also believed to come from animals. So even though it is very rare that a virus or a disease jumps species, because again, these viruses, these bacteria, they are meant to be in the specific animals. And like you, when I have a cold, or some other kind of sickness, and I have two cats, they don't get sick because I am sick, because it is very rare that they would catch some kind of sickness from humans, and the other way around. But especially in the last years with humanity booming, even though we have way better sanitation than in these times, we still have sicknesses that get spread from animals, which is interesting. And now picture these circumstances combined with the bad sanitation, even higher populated in terms of citizens per square mile. In some cases, higher populated cities with way much more contact, especially to animals.
A terrible lottery. But a colonial age city raises the odds. There used to be animals everywhere. Horses, herds of livestock in the streets, open slaughterhouses, meat markets pre-refrigeration, and rivers of human and animal excrement running through it all. A more perfect environment for diseases to jump species could hardly be imagined. So the deeper answer is that plagues come from animals, but so rarely that you have to raise the odds with many chances for infection. And even then, the newborn plague needs a fertile environment to grow. The old world had the necessary pieces in abundance. But why was a city like London filled with sheep and pigs and cows and Tenochtitlan wasn't? This brings us to the final level, for this video anyway. Some animals can be put to human use. This is what domestication means. Animals you can breed, not just hunt. Forget for a moment the modern world. Go back to 10,000 BC when tribes of humans reached just about everywhere. If you were in one of these tribes, what local animals could you capture alive and successfully pen to breed?
Yeah. I think you will come to this right now, but what is always overlooked, especially when you look at the US, if you think of the US, if you think of cowboys and Indians, you think of horses. You picture the Indians on horses, you picture the cowboys on horses, and using the term Indian, by the way, is the preferred term I have learned, because Native American would mean all of them, and Indians especially means the one in modern day US, so they prefer that term to not be generalized with like from Inuit to Inca everything. Just FYI. But the horses usually come from around this area here. And then I think the Indo-Europeans, they were called, brought them to the Middle East and Europe, and then they were spread all over the world. You can learn more on this if you watch History of the Entire World, I guess, which I also made a video on, which you can watch right after this one. And so there were today you see these horse herds flourishing because there's even an overpopulation of horses in the US, but they were brought from the old continent, and so we had our horses, we had our sheep, which also were brought over and did not exist prior. The only thing they had in America is llamas. I mean, in terms of animals that you actually could put to work. There were no donkeys, there were no horses, there were no sheep, no, I think not even goats were there, and especially no bigger and easier to tame ones like elephants, which were put to use in Africa and in Asia especially, even though they were not domesticated. So what do you have? You can perhaps domesticate a rabbit or a beaver, but what use does this have for you? And I never understood why there weren't these animals, because likewise the humans got to America via a land bridge. And I think there were findings of things like mammoths from that time in America. So mammoths are the predecessors of elephants. So why are there no elephants, especially in these middle parts, which are warmer, which are on par with India and Central Africa, where elephants are? And why didn't other animals that were flourishing all around here not also traveling to the Americas? And why were humans so migrating but others not? That's some interesting thing, because what you also don't have on the Americas, at least as far as I know, are apes. So whereas Europe, Africa, Asia were more or less settled by evolving primates, especially in Africa. You have primates and apes all over the, especially in these areas here. So in Africa and Southern Asia, you have this. But you don't have this in America. So why were there no animals?
Humans reached just about everywhere. If you were in one of these tribes, what local animals could you capture alive and successfully pen to breed? Maybe you're in North Dakota and thinking about catching a buffalo, an unpredictable, violent tank on hooves that can outrun you across the plains, leap over your head, and travels in herds thousands strong. Oh, and you have no horses to help you because there are no horses on the continent. Horses live here and won't be brought over until too late. It's just you, a couple buddies, and stone-based tools. American Indians didn't fail to domesticate buffalo because they couldn't figure it out. They failed because it's a buffalo. No one could do it. Buffalo would have been amazing creatures to put to human work back in BC, but it's not going to happen. Humans have only barely domesticated buffalo with all of our modern tools. The New World didn't have good animal candidates for domestication. Almost everything big enough to be useful is also too dangerous or too agile. Meanwhile, the Fertile Crescent to Central Europe had cows and pigs and sheep and goats. Easy peasy.
But at this point, I think aren't so like the cows that we have here now. They look at the dog. Dogs derives from wolves, and wolves are not the very first thing you have in mind when it comes to tameable, domesticatable animals in sense of it's not dangerous. So I think what my point is here is we were able to domesticate wolves. We were able to domesticate whatever came before the cow, which has had to be also dangerous, a little bit like the buffalo, because you see it when you have like a bullfight in Spain. You see how aggressive such a cow can be, and so if you could tame first and then domesticate things like bears and buffaloes early on, then would you be able, or would you get some kind of tamer line of animals? You still have wild bears, like we have wild wolves, who are very dangerous, but you also have tamed bears and tamed cows or tamed buffaloes who are maybe more peaceful towards humans. I don't know. And did they have no pigs whatsoever? So not even some other kind of boar. I really have to look up what kinds of animals lived on in America, because surely they had to be something they could tame, even in when stuck in like the pre-Bronze Age timeline. Or maybe he's just right and there was just no candidate.
Fertile Crescent to Central Europe had cows and pigs and sheep and goats, easy peasy animals comparatively begging to be domesticated. A wild boar is something to contend with if you have only stone tools, but it's possible to catch and pen and breed and feed to eat, because pigs can't leap to the sky or crush all resistance beneath their hooves. In the New World, the only native domestication contestant was llamas. They're better than nothing, which is probably why the biggest cities existed in South America, but they're no cow. Ever try to manage a herd of llamas in the mountains of Peru? Yeah, you can do it, but it's not fun. Nothing but drama, these llamas. These might seem cherry-picked examples because aren't there hundreds of thousands of species of animals? Yes, but when you're stuck at the bottom of the tech tree, almost none of them can be domesticated. From the dawn of man until this fateful meeting, humans domesticated maybe a baker's dozen of unique species.
So, for example, here you have a water bull, which is a water bull so much different, or here a yak. Are these so much different than a buffalo? Or is the point he's making that you only can tame them because you have first tamed these guys here, the horses? Because it even looks more or less like a buffalo.
Humans domesticated maybe a baker's dozen of unique species the world over. And even to get to that high a number, you need to stretch it to include honeybees and silkworms. Nice to have, but you can't build a civilization on a foundation of honey alone.
No?
These early tribes weren't smarter or better at domestication. The old world had more valuable and easy animals. With dogs, herding sheep and cattle is easier. Now humans have a buddy to keep an eye on the clothing factory and the milk and cheeseburger machine and the plow puller. Now farming is easier, which means there's more benefit to staying put, which means more domestication, which means more food, which means more people and more density, and oh, look where we're going. Citiesville, population lots, bring your animals, plagues welcome. That is the full answer. The lack of New World animals to domesticate limited not only exposure to germ sources, but also limited food production, which limited population growth, which limited cities, which made plagues in the New World an almost impossibility. In the Old, exactly the reverse, and thus a continent full of plague and a continent devoid of it. So when ships landed in the New World, there was no Americapox to bring back. The game of civilization has nothing to do with the players and everything to do with the map. Access to domesticated animals in numbers and diversity is the key resource to bootstrapping a complex society from nothing.
Okay, so I get that this is pretty much the explanation and the most logical explanation you can give from our perspective. So I subscribe, of course, to that, and it is logical. But especially when it comes to domesticating animals, like I just said, is it really, really impossible, or were there other factors in play, like maybe the Indian tribes or all the Native American tribes just had no real interest in domesticating? Maybe a thriving factor in the old world was competition, or something like that. Maybe even there was domestication of animals, but they went extinct for some reason. or abandoned because maybe of spiritual thing. Maybe buffaloes were at one point domesticated and then released because of change in faith, change in beliefs, because they also were hunted, and maybe the, for example, the Sioux or all these tribes had more fun in hunting the animals than in domesticating them, because that maybe is too easy. So what my point is that when looking at these factors, when looking at the result, at the time of this faithful meeting, as he put it, we had no evidence for domesticated animals in the Americas, except llamas and maybe guinea pigs and stuff like that. But was that true for all the time? That's my thinking here. We don't know, because there is no real chronicles we can read or stuff like that. We can see the result, but we don't see the equation, if you know what I mean. Hi there, Ossi from the future here, or for you, the less distant past. I was just starting to slowly take the research for the editing of the video when I noticed that I forget to mention something very, very important. And because I don't want to flood you in their info text box, I just thought let's do it real quick. So first and foremost, the Americas had domesticated animals apart from the llama. So they had also the alpaca. In North America, they had dogs. They did domesticate coyotes, and this is accepted knowledge, which is also why some tribes were easily adopting sheep and goats when they were brought over from the Americas. And but what I forget to mention, what I actually learned a long time ago, which I forgot, is look at the map. So you have Eurasia and Africa. You have like this whole part which is all within 20 to 30 degrees of the golden zone of agriculture and living, and which is why the most civilizations arose on these perimeters, which makes trading easier, which makes traveling easier. You have from here to there, you have a whole landmass which is more or less on the same climate, which is important. Because this is, I remembered this because when I read now about the domesticated animals in America, why was the llama or something else that was domesticated in South America not found in North America, and vice versa? It is because the landmass of the Americas is not east to west in that sense. It, like I said, this is like what 400,000 million kilometers of land with the same climate, whereas here you have more the north-south. So like llamas are in that time, at least today, we can have any animal anywhere we want, more or less, but it's a whole different climate here, as well as turkeys, for example, who were also domesticated. They can be domesticated here, but they can't here because the climate here is very different and the terrain is very different because of the Andes, because of the rainforest. So this is also why the farming lifestyle was not that much of a thing in most cases, except Tenochtitlan, which is more or less on the same level as other civilizations at that time. What like I said, in this golden zone where it is warm, but it is also wet, and you have plain areas and stuff like that. Whereas it's too wet or too hot in these areas, like in these areas. Here it is also okay, but the area is limited. This is maybe what partly from France to the Ukraine is, or to Hungary is, what you can use agriculturally here. And here it is too cold, and here it is too cold. So the usable land in Northern America is less, because of it's stretching from north to south, and not from east to west, or from west to east, like in Eurasia, Africa, or however you will call the supercontinent. And this is also why there was not many attempts at domesticating. One other reason is, for example, the buffalo was not domesticated by most tribes because they already had their means to keep them close. So why would you try even to domesticate them when you could just when you have them in your backyard and can kill them whenever you want? So yeah, this is my initial findings, but what I really wanted to tell is about the lucky landmass, if you want so, that made civilizations thrive in Eurasia and Africa, and not so much in the Americas, because as you see in the same altitude here, or latitude, whatever, you have more or less only Mesoamerica, which is not that much land. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Is the key resource to bootstrapping a complex society from nothing. And that complexity brings with it, unintentionally, a passive biological weaponry devastating to outsiders. Start the game again, but move the domesticatable animals across the sea, and history's arrow of disease and death flows in the opposite direction.
And that's what I mean. Would it really, though? Would, if, for example, there would be horses and all the other stuff in the Americas instead of Europe, would they tame it? And would they domesticate it? Especially in that variety. Maybe they would catch horses, maybe even cows, maybe sheep because it gives wool. But would they go further? And for example, we have dogs. They had coyotes. Aren't coyotes more or less like dogs? So why don't you domesticate coyotes? I am in no way an expert in domestication, and biology is absolutely my weakest point in every knowledge-related thing. And so please forgive me if I'm talking absolutely crap here, but aren't coyotes basically dogs, or basically wolves? Just the American version of it? Like the dingo in Australia, which is basically the Australian version of a wolf, which makes my whole point from earlier invalid, because yes, these animals traveled there. But it seems, and either they developed more dangerous than the ones in Eurasia, or they were just not domesticated for some reason. And for some reason, there were still no horses. I still don't know why there were no horses in America. Strange.
Arrow of disease and death flows in the opposite direction.
Oh.
This still does leave one last question. Just why are some animals domesticatable and others not? Why couldn't American Indians domesticate deer? Why can't zebras be domesticated? They look just like horses. And what does it mean to tame an animal? To answer that, click here for part 2.
Hey, Ossi from the even further future is here. And actually, this is 3 days after the recording, so it's a little bit late. And I just started editing the video, and I came to a conclusion that I want to share with you in video form, because we all know the text box is already pretty full and pretty small. So while the video is pretty good at explaining why there perhaps was no plague on the New World itself, which is okay in itself, it glosses over something and it doesn't answer a bigger question. So what it glosses over is that there is no certainty about how many people actually died because of diseases by us Europeans, because there's actually no clear evidence on how many people even lived in the Americas before Columbus came. What I read was something between 8 million and 112 million. All we know for certain is that in 1650, only around 6 million were left. So that's a huge margin. It could only have been that 2 million died. So what is it then? And the other important thing is what the video glosses over is that actually the natives that were beyond hunter-gatherer, some would never change from hunter-gatherer because the continent itself suits them for that. There was no need to do your own agriculture and stuff like that. But those who did, like in the pueblos or in the mounts in modern Mississippi, and especially those in Middle and South America, those had more than just one domesticated animal. So we all knew that things like the flu, for example, came from chicken. But the natives also had kind of like chicken. They had turkeys and they had other animals that were domesticated. In fact, they had 7 domesticated animals throughout the whole continent. So no tribe, no settlement had more than maybe 1, 2, or 3 different kinds of animals, but they lived with those animals. We have pretty clear evidence on that. In the pueblos, they, for example, lived in turkeys. The turkeys lived in the city, as well as they had some kind of dogs because they domesticated or tamed coyotes. It's unclear if they domesticated or tamed, but there were also coyotes living, which showed evidence of being fed by humans and being petted by humans. And now we come to the big question that the video does not answer. While, as I said, it gives a good explanation why it was unlikely that there was a plague in the US, in the Americas. But why, if the diseases that the Europeans brought with them would eradicate 90% of the population, why did this happen? Because we had plagues in Europe, yes, but he actually explains how they worked. You get sick, and then you either die or you get immune, and just because and this happens from the first time on. I mean, things like the Black Plague were a thing in the ancient world as well. And even then, they didn't kill 90% of the population, more a third of the population. which is still devastating, but it's not that devastating. And why wasn't it? Why weren't the natives getting immune in higher numbers or not getting the disease at all? And why did it kill almost everyone in the Americas? This is not explained by they had no plagues, because this only explains why they had no immunes to start with. But it is still the same disease, and it still works the same way. The only thing I could think of would be that due to not being exposed to it earlier, as I said, in the ancient world, most of the diseases already existed. So the humans in Eurasia maybe could evolve to get more resistant towards them and raise the odds of staying alive, whereas in the Americas they couldn't because they never had those diseases. It's still uncertain, and I'm not an expert, but I don't know if that would be a good explanation. And one other thing I could think of is that there was just a difference in the immune systems. So whereas the Europeans, maybe the European diet, the European diet was different than those in the Americas, but maybe their diet made them less immune or less resistant or something like that. It's pretty interesting, and if you have any ideas, share it with me in the comments. Maybe we can discuss about it, because I don't know, but I think this is maybe a major flaw in the video, which is still great and I still love it, and it still explains a lot. But I think these are the things that may need a second thought. So yeah, let's continue with the video. Yeah. So I think you get a really good grasp at what my thinking with all this is, because what the hell happens here? No, what? Jeez, Louise. As I said, it's easy to say from our modern perspective, yes, there were no domesticated animals and there were no candidates to be domesticated, but weren't they? And we have also to look, when did humankind start to domesticate animals? And by that time, were there still the possibility to move to the Americas, which was settled around 20,000 years ago, which was, as far as I remember, before the first settlements, but there were nonetheless settlements in America. So Norte-Chico, for example, was the first major civilization in the Americas, which developed more or less at the same time with other major civilizations like the Babylonians or Mesopotamians or the Indus River Valley. And did they really not put any animals to use? I know we have archaeological founds. We have, if it were that way, we would know, but weren't they? So it is really interesting. And if they weren't, maybe, like I said, it was more a cultural thing, not really so they just had the feeling that they don't need to, because you have a really, really large continent with a lot of space. You don't have that much warfare on it. In terms of what you have compared in Europe relatively early on with whole armies and stuff. But yeah, American history still is a very gray blur in my, especially early history, because I always think it is hard for me to grasp, to compare the developments of Eurasia and America. I know they were isolated, at least so we think, because even that is quite hard to grasp, which is why there are some sources that say that maybe Polynesians were already there, that maybe earlier Europeans were already there, and the horses were, before the horses were domesticated, there were still civilizations. So it's hard, but yeah, just let me know what you think about it, and yeah, I think we can finish the video here. I will upload a new video every second day if I manage to do so. I might change the schedule in the future to twice or thrice a week, because it is editing is pretty time intensive. And yeah, if you like the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. If you don't like the video, then give me a thumbs down and tell me maybe why. The same if you like the video. Link to the original video is in the description. Go there, leave them a like, and leave them also subscribe, because they make great content and they make good researched content. And yeah, watch my other videos, which are on various topics, mostly historical. And yeah, with that, I would say we reached the end of the video. The next video will be released in 2 days, perhaps, and will be around about the sinking of the Titanic, which is something I might have more to say on than in this video. Not that I did not talk much, but it was more speculative and stupid stuff instead of actually giving some input or something that I remember, for example. Because as I said, pre-American history is a very abstract and complex topic for me. So yeah, excuse me. But if you have something to add, just write it in the comments. And if you have a video that I should definitely comment on or react to, just let me know. So maybe tell me in the comments, and I will see if I will do so. So without further ado, I was Ossi Eastbourne. Have a nice day, have a nice evening, have a nice rest of your week or something whenever you watch this, and goodbye.